Okay, recording.
Beckler joined, my boy Beckler.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
You can. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, let me know.
I don't see anything on your page.
Yeah. I think it's because it's trying to do that live producer thing.
No, but you can, but I saw that pop up too and I said no. Are you clicking yes?
It just exited out.
What?
It didn't even, it popped up and then it just goes away and it doesn't give me a chance to type anything.
Huh.
That's probably the issue.
I guess in the future too, we can have people join through Zoom to at least have some people, you know? Should I post the Zoom link?
Hold on.
Michelle, do you want me to post the Zoom link on Facebook for people to join the Zoom meeting? Why don't I do that?
All right. Oh, it says live.
I don't see it on your page.
It says preparing. It may just be taking a while. So just wait a minute or two and we'll see. If not, then we'll just go. All right, well, we can just go ahead.
Hold on, let's wait one more minute since I just posted those things.
Do you see my screen? You're muted now.
Okay.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps doing that.
I don't think anyone's joining. We can just.
Hold on.
You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Ready?
Ready.
Let me just make sure it's recording because that would be a shame.
It says recording on my screen.
Okay. All right, let's do it. Ready?
Ready.
Ready, Freddie.
Ready, Friday.
All right. Amy.
Cheers.
Oh, I don't want to get the whole milk mustache here.
Cheers from Iowa to
Right.
Miami.
From
Bienvenido, Ami.
All right, everyone. So we are going to talk about dairy and non-dairy options today. So has anyone ever told you that you're a coward for avoiding dairy? Amy, has anyone ever told you that before?
No, I've been told that I am a coward, but not for avoiding dairy.
Okay. Well, I think I just pulled off all of my own. But that's okay. Nothing an eye stencil pencil can't fix. So let's talk more about it. So I'm Michelle Perlman, gastroenterologist and physician nutrition specialist.
And I'm Amy Perlman, urologist and men's health specialist.
So Amy, what is dairy?
You always like to put me on the spot. And what's interesting about this question is it is such a simple question. It's probably the most simple question that one could ask on this topic. And I have no idea how to answer that question.
Well, don't fret, because when I initially had to put this PowerPoint together, I actually had to look up what the definition of dairy was.
And what did Dr. Google say?
So dairy is basically milk secreted from mammals. It's very simple. Okay. So the key point here is that not all dairy contains lactose. So when people say, avoid all lactose, people think that that means that they can't have any dairy, and that's not actually the case. Milk, cow's milk has lactose, and there's many different options of cow's milk. So you can have cow's milk with the lactose, or you can have like the Lactaid or other brands, which is cow's milk with the lactose removed, okay?
Okay.
Now, talk about cheese. So cheese is dairy. It is from mammals, but there's a difference between hard cheeses and soft cheeses. So again, when people say, oh, I'm not lactose intolerant, I do fine with hard cheeses, they could still be lactose intolerant because most hard cheeses don't actually contain lactose. This is exactly mind blown. So soft cheeses, things like mozzarella or like the, cottage cheese, things like that, that contains lactose. And that's why, or when people, let's say, have cheese pizza, they will tend to have a lot of symptoms with those things if they're lactose intolerant. But if they have a slice of American cheese, then they actually may feel fine. And it really has nothing to do with lactose because one has lactose, one does not. But then the other point here is that people who are lactose intolerant can still tolerate a small amount of lactose. So if I had a sip of regular cow's milk and I am deficient or low in the enzyme, I may not have any symptoms. But if I have an entire glass, then I will have symptoms if I'm lactose intolerant, So there is a difference as far as what type of dairy and the amount of dairy that you consume or the amount of lactose. And then when we talk about yogurt, so not all yogurt is created equal. Many of the Greek yogurts, because they're very rich in probiotics, which are live bacteria that have been shown to give health benefit to humans, those bacteria actually break down the majority of the lactose in the yogurt. Amy, pay attention, stop looking at your phone.
I know someone's trying to join our Zoom meeting, so I'm trying to get him the information.
Okay, all right, I'll let it slide. So even though a yogurt, like a Greek yogurt, may have lactose in it, the bacteria actually do the job of breaking it down so that when you actually consume the lactose, it's already broken down. So it does what your body may not be able to do. Okay?
Interesting. Okay.
So the marketing campaigns, these I really haven't seen all that much, but they used to be all over TV in every magazine you would open up. And it would basically pull up, like the Incredible Hulk or Superman or Superwoman and all these celebrities that basically just endorsed milk. So they tried to, convince the consumer that if you drink a glass or two of milk a day, you can look like me or you can be as strong as me. Now, the first time that I really felt old, okay, it really hit home when I was giving a lecture to medical students. And I pulled up this slide of this little kid here. And I said, hey guys, who remembers this guy? Crickets, no joke, crickets. And that was one of the first times in my career. And I said, Jerry Maguire, the human head weighs 8 pounds. And literally no one knew what I was talking about. So that was a real
what a classic.
Classic. So when we talk about health claims, all these ads say that drinking tons of cow's milk will increase bone growth and mineralization. It's a great source of nutrients, of calcium, all of those things, and protein, etc. Now, Amy, let me ask you a question. Now, we've already kind of talked about this, so hopefully you'll get this answer right.
Yeah.
All dairy products contain lactose.
No, ma'am. I'm sorry. No, doctor.
So let's get to the basics here because it's going to be difficult for people to truly understand what lactose persistence and intolerance is if we don't understand the basics of what a carbohydrate is. So lactose is a carbohydrate. Oh, someone just joined.
Oh, we got the pot.
Okay, so when we talk about lactose, lactose is a disaccharide. And when we talk about disaccharides, that basically just means two simple sugars put together. So lactose is galactose plus glucose, okay? So that is the major carbohydrate of milk, lactose. What is sucrose? So sucrose is basically table sugar, and it's a combination of glucose plus fructose. The reason why we're talking about this is because we're going to talk about lactose intolerance. So we have brush border enzymes, which are enzymes in the first part of our small intestine or our duodenum. and these are called disaccharidases. So it's called di because these are enzymes that break up two sugar molecules. So lactase is an enzyme that breaks up lactose into glucose plus galactose. Sucrase is an enzyme that breaks up your glucose plus your fructose. Okay, maltase is an enzyme that breaks up glucose plus glucose. Okay, and then pancreatic amylase we're going to talk about. So when we talk about carbohydrate digestion, a lot of times, even in the healthcare system, we often use the terms interchangeably with digestion and absorption, when in fact they're two very different processes. Digestion is the breakdown, the molecular breakdown of a molecule. Absorption is the absorption of that molecule from the inside of the intestine into the bloodstream, okay? So digestion occurs first with salivary amylase, which is an enzyme in the mouth, and it starts to begin to digest the starch that you take in. So if I eat a bunch of rice or bread, that salivary amylase is going to start to break down that long molecule into smaller chains of glucose plus glucose, etc. Then when the food reaches the stomach, stomach acid inactivates amylase, and then you have proteases, which also take into effect. And so long story short is these long chain carbohydrates are broken down into short chain carbohydrates, okay? So if, let's say, I had a molecule that had 6 glucose molecules stuck together, it's going to reach the first part of the small intestine as just, let's say, maltose, which is glucose plus glucose, and then that disaccharide breaks it down further to 2 glucose molecules, okay?
Yeah.
So, is lactose intolerance considered an allergy, Amy Romano?
No.
No, no.
No, 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 no.
And it's interesting because many times when we go through the patient's chart and it has allergies, a lot of times it will say lactose actually in the allergy. But again, people get confused with the terminology. So cow's milk. So cow's milk on average has about 5% lactose, and it varies depending on the type of the cow. And then when we talk about the proteins that are in cow's milk, it's mainly your caseins and your whey. So when people have, let's say, a dairy allergy and they consume whey or casein, that can be problematic for them because those are from dairy, okay? So these are the proteins in cow's milk, the casein and the whey. When people have, let's say, a casein allergy, they will get a histamine release, an allergic type reaction, where they get hives, wheezing, vomiting, anaphylaxis, things like that, okay? So these are different from intolerances because these are allergic or immune responses to the protein in the cow's milk, which is different from lactose intolerance, okay? Lactose intolerance is you don't have enough or you have very low amounts of an enzyme that break down the carbohydrate. So different processes, carbohydrate breakdown versus an immune response to a food protein. And so the symptoms are different. So the reason why I say it's not a lactose allergy is because people don't get hives or anaphylaxis from the lactose, but they may get an anaphylactic or an allergic type reaction from the actual casein or the whey, and it has nothing to do with the lactose.
Interesting. Okay.
So then when we talk about skim milk versus whole milk, people oftentimes also don't realize what those terms mean. So when I go through a dietary recall with a patient and they say, oh, I have some whole milk, and I ask them, okay, well, how much sugar do you think is in the whole milk? Or if they say skim milk, I say, how much sugar do you think is in the skim milk? And they say, oh, well, it's non-fat, it's skim milk. So remember, the skim and the whole only pertains to the fat content. It has nothing to do with the sugar, okay? So when you actually compare these two types of milk side by side, your whole milk has 150 calories and 8 grams of fat and 11 grams of sugar versus your skim that also has 11 grams of sugar. Same amount of sugar here. It's just a different fat content, okay?
Got it.
So what are some downstream effects of cow's milk? So what we know is that cow's milk contains growth factors, And these growth factors can actually bind to human IGF-1 receptors. They share similar amino acid sequences. And so they can actually increase human insulin-like growth factor 1. Why does that matter? Where are you going? Are you getting on your Peloton?
No, I'm about to lose some juice in my computer.
Okay. So the reason why this is important is because when you have an increase in human IGF-1, that can actually induce cell growth, proliferation, and inhibit cell death or apoptosis. And the downstream effect of that can actually lead to tumor promotion and stimulates atherosclerosis, okay? So despite the health claims that drinking tons of cow's milk has, a lot of calcium and helps with bone strength, there's plenty of other foods that you can consume that have adequate calcium that don't also have these growth factors. So, it all comes down to a survival benefit. A baby cow, it is a survival benefit for the cow to consume its mother's milk to gain a bunch of weight in order to survive into adulthood. Unfortunately, that's what's happening to humans, is we're drinking tons of cow's milk and we gain a bunch of weight, which is no longer a survival advantage, okay? So the gene culture coevolution is that there are changes in the human genome because of culture. So let's talk about lactose. So the domestication of cows, all of this kind of contributes to certain populations that continue to have the lactase enzyme versus those that lose the enzyme, okay? And it all has to do with kind of where you live and what kind of foods you're eating. What do I mean by that? In certain populations, you have lactase persistence because it is survival advantage, okay? Back in the day when there was food shortages, to have the lactase gene that led to lactase persistence into adulthood gave you a survival advantage, okay? Because you could digest the food for nutrients and for calories.
Okay.
But actually, in reality, this lactase persistence, so having the enzyme to break down lactose into adulthood, is actually a genetic mutation. Okay, so it's not actually a disease. It is not abnormal to be lactose intolerant, although that's what society deems as abnormal. So you have a primary lactose intolerance, and the other name for that is lactase non-persistence. So the terminology gets very confusing, okay? All it means is that usually it's more common into adulthood that we lose the enzyme to break down lactose. That's all it means. And this typically occurs in populations where they eat more plants and less cow. So typically in Asian and African populations where they lose that enzyme, okay? You can also develop secondary lactose intolerance, which is also called acquired lactase non-persistence. Again, the terminology gets quite confusing. What this means is that I could have tolerated lactose my entire life. I get a bad stomach bug. I get a parasitic infection like Giardia, something like that. Any sort of disorder or infection, if I had celiac disease or Crohn's disease, some sort of systemic inflammatory response, that can damage my small intestine, the first part of my small intestine, my duodenum, and that can knock out those brush border enzymes to where I was doing fine up until I got a stomach bug. It ruined my microbiome. There were a lot of shifts in the microbiome. I lost those enzymes, and now all of a sudden I can't tolerate lactose. That happens. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay. You're nodding your head and I don't understand.
I'm nodding it because I don't, because I think it's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think it's interesting and yeah.
So when this happens, it doesn't mean that I will indefinitely be lactose intolerant, okay? But if it's no longer survival advantage, then many times that enzyme won't come back, okay? So it may not be permanent. Now, let's say, for instance, with celiac disease, which is, we spoke about on a prior seminar, which is an immune problem to gluten, which damages your small intestine. If I then go gluten-free and my small bowel heals, then I can potentially get those enzymes back as the small bowel heals from whatever damage, okay? So this is secondary because something happened to my brush border enzymes that caused this. So common symptoms, this all occurs because when you take in the lactose molecule, you can't break it down. You don't have that enzyme. So what happens is that molecule, oops, let me go back here. It pulls in water into the intestine. The bacteria then kind of break it down and produce gas, so hydrogen, methane, and sulfur, and carbon dioxide, and that's why people often get bloating. So the main symptoms would be diarrhea and bloating after consuming lactose. Abdominal pain can occur, but is not necessarily the main symptom. Now, it can get a little bit complicated because these symptoms, there's so much overlap. So people can be lactose intolerant, or they can have irritable bowel or other carbohydrate intolerances. So remember, lactose is only one carbohydrate. People can have issues with other enzymes, some genetic and some not. So some people can have, let's say, fructose intolerance, where they take in even natural fruits that contain a lot of fructose and they get a lot of bloating. That has nothing to do with lactose. It's just a different carbohydrate, okay? So we talk about lactose a lot because it's quite common, but people can also have issues digesting other carbohydrates. People can have overgrowth of bacteria in their small bowel, things like that. So there's a lot of overlap with these things. Just because someone is bloated or has diarrhea does not necessarily mean they're lactose intolerant. So when we talk about testing, we actually don't even do testing all that much anymore. The old test we used to do was the hydrogen breath test, which basically measured the hydrogen after you gave someone lactose. But it's a very cumbersome test. It takes several hours. And when you give someone a bunch of lactose and they're lactose intolerant, it's very uncomfortable for them. So we end up not even doing the test. So for the most part, if people's symptoms are quite classic, where they say, oh yeah, my bloating is worse in the morning, and they say, well, I just have my coffee, it's really usually not the coffee, it's all the regular milk that they're putting in the coffee. So you can usually tease this out with a good dietary recall. And I really just tell them avoid lactose containing products. This is very different from when we counsel people with potential gluten issues, because we as humans, it's not a survival advantage to consume lactose. It doesn't really have huge repercussions as far as cost on groceries, etc., if I tell someone to avoid lactose, okay? Or if someone really loves their cow's milk, they can always use, take a lactate enzyme, which basically just provides the enzyme for them. They take it with the pizza or the ice cream, and it basically just breaks down the food. But in general, if most of my patients are trying to lose weight or feel better, then them eating a bunch of ice cream or pizza is not going to help them anyway. So them taking a lactate pill before doing so is not going to help them overall, okay? So let's quickly and lastly talk about our non-dairy milk options. There's so many options out on the market, and that's why it can get quite confusing. So it depends on allergies and dietary preferences. If someone has an almond allergy, I'm not going to tell them to have almond milk. Or if someone's trying to avoid soy, they're not going to have soy milk, okay? So it depends on those types of things. When you're looking at the types of milks, it's mainly broken down into soy milk, rice milk, oat milk, and then your nut milks, okay? And then the coconut milk. So you have the cashew, the hazelnut, the almond. A lot of these varieties have both the non-fat version and a full fat version, okay? So your first question when you're trying to figure out the milk is what type of milk do you want? Then how much fat do you want? You want a full fat variety or you want a low fat variety, okay? Then you want to know, do I want a higher sugar like the sweetened ones or an unsweetened that has very low sugar, okay? So like the almond milk has the unsweetened, which is 30 calories and like 1 gram of sugar. Versus,
so just for the record, that's what I'm drinking here.
Yes.
Is the almond milk.
Versus the almond milk that is sweetened that can have, let's say, 80 calories and much more sugar. So it's very important that you pay attention to that, okay, as far as the unsweetened versus sweetened. Now, the unsweetened also come in flavored versus unflavored. You can get original, vanilla, chocolate. So there's a variety of flavors as well. And in general, your low carb or low sugar options are going to be your nut milk, okay?
Michelle, which one is your go-to?
My go-to is either, honestly, the nut milks, the almond, the cashew milk, or I'll do the coconut, because they're all low calorie and low sugar.
Yeah, I've had the almond milk and maybe the cashew. I haven't seen the hazelnut.
Yeah. So you can also make your own at home. Now, these varieties, if you make it yourself, only last a couple days. So you typically want to make it in smaller batches. It's actually quite easy. I've never tried it, but I've heard they actually taste phenomenal. So while you're quarantined at home, now's the quarantine to start making your own nut milks. So all you basically do is you soak whatever nut you're using overnight for usually 1 to 2 days. You drain and rinse it. You combine the water in a blender or a food processor with the almonds, and then you basically strain out the grit or the almonds, and then you use like a cheesecloth and you basically press out all of the liquid, and that's your almond milk. And you can actually use the leftover almonds, like the gritty part, as your almond meal to bake with.
It seems like you would have to crush up a lot of almonds to get like 8 ounces of almond milk.
Well, but remember, you're soaking it in the water. You're flavoring the water.
Okay.
Not actually like milk.
Like I'm not milking the almonds.
I'd like to see that.
Okay. Next time on Pearlman and Pearlman.
How to milk almonds. Okay. So the key points here is that really just remember that lactose intolerance is not actually disease, it's actually normal. Lactose persistence is actually a DNA mutation. So, to be lactose intolerant, I don't want people to feel like they're missing out on life or it's not a survival advantage. Now when food is not scarce, it's no longer a survival advantage, okay? It has a lot of growth factors in it. Like I mentioned in the earlier label, whole milk or skim milk still has 11 grams of sugar. So there's, better options when people are trying to lose weight or trying to limit their sugar. Humans are the only mammals that steal another mammal's milk. So remember that. Okay? And, it's becoming more and more prevalent and more of a common thought that cow's milk can actually contribute to a lot of chronic illnesses because it can be pro-inflammatory with all of these growth factors, okay? So I don't necessarily tell people to go dairy-free. If I think they're lactose intolerant, I'll say, okay, at least stay away from the lactose-containing dairy. The last thing I want to do is make people develop very restrictive eating patterns, but it really just depends on what the person's goals are.
Yeah, and Michelle, just to touch on your last comment there with the inflammation, we'll do a talk at a different time talking about foods and drinks that are pro and anti-inflammatory, because for a lot of the patients who I see in the office who are coming in with various like pelvic pain syndromes, I've actually started counseling them to decrease their pro-inflammatory intake, which for a lot of these guys, it's like a lot of meat and a lot of dairy.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. So that is it. Stay tuned, stay healthy. Knowledge is life and knowledge is power. So yeah. We will do another webinar tomorrow. Not sure what time yet, probably early, late afternoon. Topic to be determined.
Awesome. Thank you. Cheerio, folks.
Cheerio. Good.
That was great.